Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how you can make your house or your living room into a jungle full of plants. So this is actually my living room here, and as you can see I've got plenty of plants on show at the moment. So it's quite popular these days. A lot of people are starting to put a lot more plants into their living rooms again. House plants are becoming more popular and much more common than they used to be, especially the large foliage plants. So I'll show you a lot of the plants that I have in here. I'll give you recommendations as to what plants are easy to look after, which ones have nice foliage, other ones that might have nice flowers, such as the orchids. So I'll start off in probably a clockwise direction, starting with the orchids. Orchids are probably fantastic for colour. As you can see, they come in a good variety of different colours, a lot of pinks, purples, whites and anything in between, to be honest. You can sometimes get some blue ones as well. And there's two different types that I've got here on display at the moment. The Phalaenopsis orchid is by far the easiest to grow. Flowers almost year round, got really showy flowers, lots of different colour choice, and it's very easy to look after and very easy to water as well. You don't have to water it too often. Whereas this one at the back is a Dendrobium orchid. Dendrobium orchids generally come in pink or white, and they tend to flower on and off. They don't have a constant flowering. It's like the Phalaenopsis do. So coming down, I've got my succulent collection. So this is just my money plants. My big money plant here, which is about 5 years old now, and a couple of smaller kind of bonsai ones at the bottom there. Money plants are really easy, probably one of the easiest succulents to grow. They need very little watering, so if you forget to water them, they're not going to die on you. But they do need a lot of sunshine, so you've got to make sure they're in quite a sunny position. And as you can see, they make a lovely little miniature tree kind of shape, and they've got really nice green foliage. If you have a lot of sun, you'll get a slight red tinge to the foliage like this. If it's not quite as sunny, you'll just have very glossy, lush green foliage. So I've got an Anthurium here, another very easy to look after plant. Doesn't need a lot of sunlight, does quite well in the shady corner, and has these really glossy red flowers. And this will always have flowers on it, because each individual flower will last for months at a time. And it's just got a really nice glossy colour, and it looks like, almost like wax. Some people don't like it because it looks like plastic, but other people do like it because it looks like plastic. So moving along, we've got a few of our larger plants here, and also plants with some nice foliage. So this one at the bottom here is the avocado tree. Avocados are really easy to start just from an avocado stone, from a shop bought avocado. This one's about 2 or 3 months old. It's quite a young one still. You can just about see down here, if I scrape away some of the compost, that there is actually an avocado stone there, and it's just kind of split and the trunks come out of the middle there. Avocados are a very easy plant to grow again. Needs a fair bit of sunlight, but it gives you lovely big leaves, and it will eventually grow into a tree. So you only grow this unless you've got plenty of space. If you don't have plenty of space, you have to keep pruning it and keep it smaller. That's the same with this one here, the rubber plant, the Ficus elastica. This is native to Asia and a lot of the tropics, but it does well in a household environment. It's really quite adaptable. You know, you can give this full sunlight and it'll be happy. You can also give it deep shade and it will also be okay. Deep shade, it won't grow much, but it will survive. It's got really lovely glossy foliage again, you can polish this up to be even more shiny. The only care tips I would really suggest with this is make sure you dust it. I've left this one undusted just as an example. You can see how quickly the dust builds up on it, but it's very easy to dust down and polish, and it does look really good, and eventually this will grow into a large tree. This one's about 4 years old, and as you can see it's already about 5 foot tall. It's growing quite well, and it will just continue to branch out and get larger and larger. So over here I've got a parlor palm. Parlor palms are nice for their frilly fronds that you can see here. Quite nice foliage. This does really well in quite shady conditions, so if you don't have enough space on your windowsills for your plants, you can put this further away from the sun. It'll do quite well in a shady position. Parlor palms, they're quite slow growing, but this will slowly get taller and taller. It'll probably get about 3 or 4 foot tall. Parlor palm isn't the biggest palm. You can get a lot of other palms which are much taller. Some of those, you know, they can reach 2 or 3 meters, and you've got to have a lot of space for them. With the parlor palm, you don't need a lot of space, so you can have them quite small. This one's a lot bigger than what you'll buy it as. You'll buy it as about a third or a quarter of the size of this, and it will slowly grow. Maximum height, as I say, is about 3 or 4 foot, so this one still has a bit more to grow. Up here I've got my pothos vine, also known as devil's ivy. As you can see, I've trained it over the ceiling at the moment. The original pot's up there, but it's grown all the way down and it now comes right into the corner of the room just down there. So as you can see, pothos vines, they're another good one for foliage. They've got really nice glossy foliage again, quite a nice sheen to them when they're polished up, and they've got a lovely variegation as well, cream and green. And these don't need much light at all either. These can survive with very little light. But as a word of caution, if you do give it very little light, it will survive, but the problem is it will just have green leaves like this. You'll lose a lot of the variegation. So if your variegation starts to disappear, give it more light, and you'll notice the newer leaves will start getting more variegated again and looking nice. So down here, a couple more slightly unusual plants. So starting here, we've got the elephant foot vine. This isn't just coming out of dormancy at the moment. You can just see his little growth shoot coming there. This one's really interesting because it has such an interesting cortex and trunk there. Really nice kind of geometric patterns as it grows. And this will get bigger and bigger. Eventually this could get 3 or 4 foot in diameter, but it'll probably take 10-20 years. But as you can see, it's got some lovely patterns on the bark. So even when it's in its dormant phase, it still looks pretty nice. So over here we have a Portucaria afra, also known as an elephant bush. This looks very similar to the jade, but its leaves tend to be a lot smaller and thinner. And this one in particular, I managed to find a stone at the seaside. As you can see, there's a small hole in the top of the stone, and it's got a nice flat base, so it works very well as a little miniature pot. And that's growing out there quite happily as a small bonsai. Talking of bonsai, here's my Ficus benjamina bonsai tree. Ficus benjamina, you can grow them as quite large shrubs or trees. They can grow up to 30 meters in the wild, but in your home setting, you know, they'll be quite a lot smaller. This one I've kept as a bonsai just to keep its size. It's recently been pruned, and you can click on the link for the video for that. It was a lot bigger, and it will grow a lot more leaves soon. You can see a lot of the fresh growth starting to grow. Generally, you can grow this as a normal house plant. It will get a similar size to the Frangipani over there. It'll become quite a large tree, and it's got a moderate growth rate. It can do quite well in shade as well as full sun, but in full sun you'll certainly get a lot better growth and it'll look nicer. But as I say, it can survive in a bit of shade, it just won't grow as fast. So this one's, as I say, has been trained as a bonsai. It's only about 2 or 3 years old, so it's still got a bit more training to do to thicken up its trunk, but it's already starting to get the nice bonsai kind of structure there. So moving along, this is the biggest tree I've got currently in the flat, which is Frangipani. You quite often see it in the tropics. This really does need a lot of sun, so I wouldn't grow this in a house unless you got 1, plenty of space, and 2, plenty of sunlight as well. So as you can see, this is blocking out a lot of sun from the window because it needs a lot of sun. If this was grown in a shadier area, it would really just suffer, it wouldn't grow very well. But this is a really great plant for its leaves, really big architectural leaves. You can see the size of them there. They're over 1 foot in length, they're really big, lovely leaves. It also has very nice flowers as well. But if you wanted to get this to flower in your house, you're going to have to have it on a really sunny position, and you're also going to have to give it lots of sunlight as well, and lots of warmth. So I don't have enough light here in Scotland, but if you're anywhere further south, you could probably get this to flower quite easily, as long as you give it enough heat and enough light. Moving along, I've got a variety of succulents here. A nice succulent trough as well. Quite a good idea to put succulents in a trough because it saves a lot of space. All of these plants originally were in individual pots, and it filled up the entire windowsill, so I ran out of space for more plants. But putting them up here into a trough gives them a lot more space. And there's a lot of different varieties in here. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just mention a couple. So there's Echeveria down here. It's got really nice foliage. You can see a lovely kind of waxy appearance. It almost looks a bit like a flower the way that the leaves are arranged. Echeverias are very popular, and as with all these succulents here, all the succulents and cacti do need a lot of sunlight, so they need to be in a sunny position. And I had over here, I've also got Aloe variegata here. You can see it's got the nice variegated foliage, and also a prickly pear cactus. Prickly pear cactus are probably one of the easiest cacti to grow, but you do, as a word of warning, you do have to be careful because they have incredibly powerful spines, and these spines are actually barbed, so once they stick in you, they're not going to come out very easily. So only grow this if you somewhere that you're not going to get hit by it. For example, having it next to a sofa like this is probably a pretty bad idea, to be honest, because everyone sitting here could get pricked. So have that somewhere away from people. But as I say, it grows really fast, probably the fastest growing cactus there is. And as you can see, this one's quite a size. It's got several pads on it. It's only about 2 years old. Coming across here, I've got my hibiscus plant. This one's quite small at the moment, although this tropical hibiscus, which is Hibiscus rosa sinense, can get quite large. It can grow into a tree, but generally in a household setting, as long as you keep it in a small pot, it's not going to get to the size of a tree. And I'll show you a couple of photos now, and also a time lapse of what this looks like in flower, because this is absolutely stunning. I mean, the foliage itself is quite nice. It's got quite nice dark green glossy foliage, but it's the flower that really makes this plant. So moving along, got my chilies here. Chili plants are great to grow. This one's really on its way out. It's too old. Chili plants, really, you grow them just for 1 year, sometimes 2 years they'll survive. This one's about 3 or 4 years old now, so it's quite an elderly plant, starting to die out. But it's great because over the years it's given me almost a chili every single day. This one is an Apache variety, which is really good because it stays quite small but crops really heavily, so you don't need too much space for it. And with chili plants, you want to give them as much sunlight as possible to get as many chilies growing as you can. And it's just great to have in the house. You'll always have a constant supply of chilies for making all those spicy dishes and all those kind of curries and things that you want to make with them. Moving on, we've got a Venus flytrap here. Very popular plant, obviously, because it moves, one of the few plants that does. Now, you can feed this insects or flies. And if you do have flies in your house, they'll very often get trapped by this because they get attracted to it. It kind of has a slight pink tinge to it, and a lot of the flies think that's maybe flesh or an animal. They'll land on it and then they'll get trapped and eaten. So it'll feed itself if you do have any flies in your house. And I'll just trigger it now just to show you it in action. But I would recommend that you don't trigger it unless you're feeding it, because the more you trigger the traps, the quicker they'll die off. Over here is another cacti collection, just a small selection of cacti. And lastly, in this part of the living room, I've got a small penjing feature here, which is still in training, so it's not its correct size proportions yet. But penjing is basically like bonsai, but you have a small landscape within the area as well. So it's not just the plant, the miniature tree. You've also got little houses. You've maybe got stones, mountains, a little pond down here or a lake, and bridges and things like that. So there's a whole landscape included around your bonsai tree. Over here we have some more flowering plants. These are Streptocarpus. They used to be very popular as houseplants. Not quite as popular nowadays as they used to be, but they are starting to come back into fashion. And these are great. The flowers don't last as long as the Phalaenopsis orchids do, which are these ones over here. But they keep producing so many flowers that you'll have an almost constant abundant supply throughout the summer. Even though each little flower maybe only lasts a week or two, there's constantly new ones coming up from the base. As you can see here, there's some new shoots coming up, and they come in a huge variety of different colours. You can see I've got a few different ones here. This one's a very dark kind of violet purple colour. It looks very blue in the camera, but I can assure you it's definitely a more of a purple. There's a nice kind of polka dot purple colour here. It's called polka dot purple if anyone wants to know the variety of that one. It's got a nice kind of veining pattern. This one's called Kate. This one here, which is a kind of purple with lighter bits on it. And this very dark purple one here is called Targa, if anyone's looking for the variety of these. I've also got aloe vera plants here. Quite useful if you get burnt or anything. You can just cut a leaf, squeeze out the gel from inside and use that on your arm. So that's all the plants I've got here in my living room. As you can see, there's quite a selection. Some people like to go even further than this, and what they'll do is they'll build a huge amount of shelving maybe on one wall, and then with the shelving they can have hundreds of plants, have a whole green wall. You can do this, but you'll be quite limited to what you can grow. Generally people will grow shade-loving plants such as the pothos vine up there. A lot of foliage plants could they'll do well in shady positions. But if you want anything with colour or flowers, you really got to have a bit more sunlight. And that's when you got to position your plants more on the windowsills, especially if you have any cacti or succulents. They really need a lot more sunlight, so you need to put them towards the sunny window. But certainly if you just after foliage, you can put plenty of shelving on your wall, and you can have a lot of plants growing on there and have like a green wall kind of jungle effect. And lastly, about the environment in your house, if you're growing plants, the plants really like high humidity and high temperatures, but this is actually quite a problem for your house because you can start getting mold and other issues like that. And in fact, if you have this kind of number of plants Unless you're in a warm country where you can keep the windows open all the time, or you have some kind of ventilation system to keep the humidity down in your property, you're definitely going to need a dehumidifier. So that's what I've got here. I've got a dehumidifier. This just takes out the humidity from the air and then just collect the water. As you can see, there's a tray here full of water that I just have to empty daily. That sucks out about 2 to 6 litres of water out the air every day. If I didn't have that, because this flat is very well sealed and there's no mechanical ventilation system in here, because of all the water that's going into the plants, also water from just general like cooking and drying of clothes, the humidity is quite high. But with the plants, there's the extra humidity coming out of the plants, especially the thirstier ones like this Frangipani here. This could drink up to 1 litre a day in really hot summer sunny conditions, and that litre a day that I'm watering into that plant is going into the atmosphere. And that's why it's important that if you have a lot of plants, especially if you're starting to grow like a green wall where your entire wall is just completely green, you're going to have to think about the humidity levels. Either you're going to have to open the windows more, which will probably cost you a lot of money in heating if you're living in a cold country, or you're going to have to run dehumidifiers, which are going to cost quite a bit as well in electricity. And the final thing, if you do have a lot of plants but you don't have many big windows, your final option to get more plants is to have grow lamps. I haven't got any proper grow lamps in my flat because, as you can see, I've got a huge south-facing window here. I've got a lot of light coming in from my balcony, and I've also got a window on that side. So I've got windows on 3 sides of this room, so there's loads of light coming in here. Light isn't a problem for me. What I do is I just put my plants that need the sunshine towards the window or towards the area of the flat where the sun comes through. You can see the beams of light kind of coming across. Different times of day, different areas will be hit by that light, but there's always areas which are quite dark. So those dark corners I'll leave for plants that like the shadier conditions. But if you do live in a property that has low light levels and doesn't have many windows, you'll have to get grow lights. Grow lights, the best ones to go for probably these days are LEDs because they're very low in power, plus they don't produce much heat, so you don't have to worry about getting a really hot house and start having fire issues as well. And grow lights are great. I use them occasionally in winter because here in Scotland the light levels are very low. So I have got 1 or 2 which I use on plants that are really struggling, but generally I don't use any grow lamps because of all the windows they have. But also the electric costs. Electric costs are going to be very high if you start using grow lamps. But you can position them above your plants, and that means you can have pretty much unlimited number of plants, even if you don't have much shade. So there we are, that's how to have a jungle bedroom or living room or whatever room in the house. As I say, do be careful when it comes to humidity levels. It can creep up if people are not prepared. So make sure if it's already a humid property, you're going to keep the humidity levels down. But there we are, that's my living room. As I say, looks great having all these plants, and also it's also really good for keeping the toxic chemicals down. There's been research by NASA on that, and it's shown that plants can keep down certain toxic chemicals, and of course they filter the air and produce plenty of oxygen as well. And if you do have a balcony, of course you can extend your little miniature jungle outside to your balcony as well.